I'm broadcasting at 3:58, right?
Yeah, okay, that's not a problem. Just figure out the stuff with Pramath. I think Manisha is speaking to him right now.
Broadcasting it now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sanjay Deshpande, your host for the day. Welcome to day 3 of the Republic of Letters, a virtual conference for higher education leaders in India. This is track 2, the Resilient Institution. Here, our speakers will address the main administrative and governance related questions that have been plaguing our higher education leaders ever since the COVID-19 pandemic hit us. In addition to the platform Zoom, the Republic of Letters is also being broadcast live on YouTube. Right now, we have our first keynote address of the day on reinventing Indian universities being delivered by Professor D.P. Singh, Chairman of the University Grants Commission, on the first track. This session is being moderated by Professor Malabika Sarkar, Vice Chancellor of Asoka University. In case you're interested in attending this session, please click on the link that has been provided to you in the chat box. This link will take you to track 1, where the keynote address is currently underway. Please note the keynote address is only being delivered on track 1. So in case you're interested, please click on the link that has been provided to you. We will begin with our first panel discussion, which will be a part of this track on new skills for a new workplace around 4:30 p.m. See you soon. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the day 3 of Republic of Letters, Groundbreak 2020. Our first keynote address for the day is currently underway on track 1 on the topic of reinventing Indian universities by Professor D.P. Singh, who's the chairman of University Grants Commission. This session is going to be moderated by Professor Malabika Sarkar, Vice Chancellor, Ashoka University. In case you're interested in attending this session, please click on the link that has been provided to you in the chat box. This link will take you to track 1. Please note the keynote addresses are only visible on track 1. So in case you're interested in this session, we urge you to click on the link and move to track 1. We will begin with our first panel discussion on this track around 4:30 p.m. See you soon. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of Republic of Letters, Groundbreak 2020. Currently, our first keynote address for the day is being delivered on track 1 on the topic of reinventing Indian universities by Professor D.P. Singh, the chairman of University Grants Commission. This session is being moderated by Professor Malabika Sarkar, Vice Chancellor, Ashoka University. In case you're interested in attending this session, please click on the link that has been provided to you in the chat box. This link will take you to track 1 where you can attend the keynote address. Please note the keynote address is only visible on track 1. The first panel discussion on this track will begin around 4:30 p.m. See you soon.
Sanjay.
Good afternoon, everyone. We will be beginning our first panel discussion on this track shortly. Meanwhile, our keynote address is currently underway on our track 1. In case you're interested, please do click on the link that has been provided. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Sanjay Deshpande, your host for the day. For all of you who are joining us from the keynote address, we hope it was a great session. For everyone else, welcome to day 3 of the Republic of Letters, a virtual conference for higher education leaders in India. This is track 2, the Resilient Institution. Here, our speakers will address the main administrative and governance related questions that have been plaguing our higher education leaders ever since the COVID-19 pandemic hit us. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly take you guys through some parallel sessions that we have running today. Our first session on track 1 is transitioning to digital, connect the dots, keeping professional education relevant. In case you're interested in attending this session, please click on the link that has been provided to you in the chat box. This link will take you to track 1, where the first panel discussion will start soon. We also parallelly have another session under track 3, leading from the front. This is an invite-only track for higher education leaders. We have a session on the topic of crisis as an opportunity leading in the pandemic. In case you're interested in attending this session, click on the link that has been provided to you in the chat box. This link will take you to track 3. Do note you may be required to put in a password, which we had shared with you earlier over email and WhatsApp. On that note, without much ado, let me get started with the first panel discussion on track 2 on the topic of new skills for a new workplace. This session is being chaired by Shresi Singh. She's the founder and CEO of Harappa Education. She's been the director for careers, executive education, and program development at Vedika Scholars Program and has been a teaching faculty at Naropa, Anand, and NCU. She's also the author of The Wealth Walas and The Girl Who Thinks in Numbers, and has been the editor at Inc. India and a columnist at Mint. Our other panelist for today is Professor Christopher Dede. He's a professor in learning technologies at Harvard Graduate School of Education. He's the chair for Technology, Innovation, and Education program, again at Harvard Graduate School of Education. He has been the senior director at the National Science Foundation and holds a doctoral degree in education from University of Massachusetts. Last but not the least, we have Mr. Vinay Hebar. He's the Senior Vice President and Head of International Markets at Harvard Business Publishing. He has been the Managing Director, India for Harvard Business Publishing. He also has been the Managing Director for Wolters Kluwer and holds an MBA from Marshall Business School, USC. This session will run for 30 minutes. We encourage all of you to please send us questions using the Q&A tool, which is available on the platform. The panelists will address some of these questions towards the end. Over to you, Shresi.
Thank you, Sanjay. And you seem to be having a good day. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you so much, Chris and Vinay, for joining us. Wonderful to see both of you today. Thank you, Chris, for having our background as well. And thank you for being up bright and early to be able to do this session for us. Thanks. Hi, Vinay. I can't see you yet, but I'm hoping the host will bring you up as well. With that, I know that Chris certainly has a hard stop because he has to run into another session. Let me just get started. Nowhere does our event tagline of Groundbreak 2020 manifests itself better than the social and economic lab that is the workplace right now. And what has happened across the world over the last 3 months on what it means actually to be at work. And of what even work has been upended in the most dramatic fashion. You have new productivity rhythms, new ways of working, new approaches are now, in fact, they're now fast becoming old as we get more used to this normal and even forget that we had before. Some people call it not work from home, but live at work. And wherever you are on that spectrum, we all know that we've had to learn and acquire a variety of new skills, and that is unlikely to change. That demand for new skills, which is really the focus of a conversation, is an acceleration of the demand that we had already been seeing over the last 4 and 5 years for the workplace. Corona, like it has accelerated and brought all sharp demands into center stage, has done that as well for new skills at the workplace. As a founder and a CEO of a startup, I have experienced the need for new skills, both myself individually and in the people who are part of a team. So I'm delighted to lead this conversation, a very important conversation with both Professor Dede and Vinay, who both focus with their unique lens at the question of skills and at the way businesses work. So with that, what we will do is we will have both of them spend 5 minutes each and present to us some slides and thoughts they have got with them, and then go into a discussion and conversation of this topic. So Chris, if I can invite you please to go first and share with us, share with us on the work that you've been doing. Most specifically, Chris, of course, Sanjay introduced him, but his new book, The 60-Year Curriculum, New Models for Lifelong Learning in the Digital Economy, is so resonant at this time. Chris, you couldn't have timed that better. So I'm delighted that you're here to share your learnings and insights with us. So please go ahead.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm going to share my screen so that I can show just a few slides as part of explaining what the 60-year curriculum is about. So this is a way of rethinking lifelong learning. Right now, all of us were probably prepared for our first job as if it was going to be our only job. And yet we know that that's not going to be the case in the future. So thinking about learning throughout life, upskilling, reskilling, preparing for major shifts in society is what the 60-year curriculum is about. And an important point to make about this is that dispositions, intrapersonal skills of different kinds, are going to be extremely important in people preparing for perhaps 5 to 7 careers over the course of their lifetime. So we think about education as involving knowledge and skills, but we also need to think about involving flexibility, resilience, confidence, initiative, entrepreneurship, and so on. So why is this important? We're facing an epic half century. We know that despite the pandemic, lifespan is increasing, and people typically in the future will need to work for 6 decades to have enough money to cover their retirement. And during that time, that half century or so, we are facing huge systemic disruptions. The book was written, incidentally, before the pandemic, which just could have been added to this list, but climate change, failure to attain the UN sustainability goals, shifts in the division of labor, which I'll talk about next, advances in technology across a wide range of fields that are changing the future of work, and all of this taking place faster than any other evolution in history because we now have billions of people connected by mobile devices and social media to drive the pace of change very, very quickly. So just briefly about the shifts in the division of labor. People talk about automation and artificial intelligence taking over jobs. That will be true for a relatively small fraction of occupational roles. But for almost all occupational roles, artificial intelligence will shape the role because it will increasingly do the simpler parts of the role. And that creates an interesting challenge in terms of people being able to decide whether they're going to work for a machine or whether they're going to partner with a machine and make the job even more powerful. Let me illustrate this by talking about higher education. So Ashok Goel at Georgia Tech University has been developing a series of artificial intelligence technologies that are essentially partners for instructors, content tutors, teaching assistants that can answer questions, that can run virtual laboratories, that can help students conduct literature reviews, that can do formative assessment, even that can scan students' discussions and come up with potential social connections for them. And if we simply use all of these AI assistants without changing what we do, it's going to diminish the role. But if we instead use them not for AI, but for IA, for intelligence amplification, then our role can get deeper and more powerful because the simple parts of the role are being offloaded. So AI versus IA is an issue in higher education, but it's also an issue across a full range of occupations. And this 60-year pipeline that we're talking about is an issue across many of the occupations that universities prepare people for. So it's an exciting time, it's a scary time, and I'm really happy this group is meeting to discuss it.
Thank you so much, Chris. As always, your AI and pivoting that to say IA, it's artificial intelligence to intelligence amplification, I think is just such a powerful and simple thing for us to remember. Before we get into more detail and the conversation, let me invite Vinay now. And Vinay, how do we even think about new skills for a new workplace when we don't quite even know what the new workplace will be like? So, come and tell us, paint the picture of the new workplace for us, as well as showcase the leadership capabilities that you think will be at a premium going forward.
Sure, Shreyasi. Before I jump in, just want to confirm you can see me and hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. Hello, everyone. Delighted to be with all of you today and honored to share the platform with Professor Dede. Shreyasi, always good to see you.
Thank you.
Much of what I share today draws upon the research that we at Harvard Business Publishing have conducted around the world recently with our subscribers and companies through our corporate learning interactions, companies across sectors. I've also had the opportunity to do some primary research in China to understand how the crisis has shaped the workplace there and what lessons we can draw. China was interesting given that they were a couple of months ahead in terms of the COVID onset and re-entry, at least round one of re-entry. This culminated in a recent HBR article that I had the opportunity to co-author with HBS Professor Das Narayan Das and my colleague Liang Li in China. I'll talk about what Shreyasi just mentioned, the new workplace and the skills required to thrive therein. But workplaces don't exist in a vacuum. They are often a reflection of the current business realities. So I'm going to spend a minute painting the picture of the current business realities. Sanjay, if you could advance the slide, please. So the pandemic has the potential to redefine many long-standing assumptions we've had about the rules of business. While the implications may vary from industry to industries, businesses, as they emerge from lockdowns and disruptions, will continue operating through crazy levels of global socioeconomic volatility. Businesses are subject to the crossfires of global trade wars, protectionism, immigration tightening, changing government regulations, more recently race tensions, and weakening global institutions. Crises are not new to businesses. They've faced a lot of external crises, floods, earthquake, product recalls, financial system failures, recessions, PR disasters. They often plan for it through risk management, insurances, disaster management, and they usually weather it and recover, right? Two things make this pandemic very different and exceptionally tricky in my view. Firstly, it's a combination of health and economic crisis. And second, the duration is unknown. There is no known end date. As individuals and as businesses, we don't know what the planning horizon is here. Metaphorically, it's like asking an athlete to run a race without telling them the distance to the finish line. Are we in a 100-meter sprint, 400-meter run, or is it a marathon? How do you pace yourself? So that is the question business leaders are dealing with essentially. So as a result of all this uncertainty, businesses are resorting to more conservative cash management, emphasis on quality of balance sheets. Supply chains are going through a period of rapid changes and swinging from extreme efficiency to balancing need for redundancy. Customer behaviors have changed. Demand has contracted for many industries, and businesses as well as governments are walking the tightrope of lives versus livelihood. and short-term survival versus long-term competitiveness. These are all huge challenges, but it's not all gloom and doom. Some industries, of course, have been beneficiaries, and it's creating its share of opportunities for companies that are well-funded, agile, and innovative. We've known all along that leadership is important and a source of competitive advantage. What has become amply clear in company after company is that the competence and character of its leaders are more important than ever. And often the single largest differentiator between navigating this crisis successfully versus potentially terminal illness of the business, right? So that's the business context. What are some of the characteristics of the new workplace? In regular times, employees, clients, vendors, they may not always understand the purpose and values of an organization. Companies talk about being employee centric, customer centric, friendly to the community. The core values have come out clearly basis the action of the leadership in the recent crisis. Leaders have been under the microscope, and in this circumstances, employees are seeing what the values are, and finding meaning and purpose has become increasingly important to attract, retain, engage talent and partners, even more so post-crisis. The second point there deals with fixing your roof on a sunny day, and the importance of this has become all too clear. As companies seek to future-proof themselves, like I mentioned, the supply chains, cash management, agile operations, and capacity utilizations become bigger priorities. One of the striking features of the crisis has been the speed at which organizations have adapted. And we've seen that in India, we've seen that all over the world. They've had to shift to completely online models to be able to continue serving customers and suppliers, right? As Satya Nadella said, we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. Speed was of the essence, and the need to continue operations and find creative solutions to overcome process barriers imposed by the lockdown and squeeze cost has required companies to move with bold decisions at speed, right? Increasingly, it's no longer about hierarchical organizations. It's given way to virtual cross-functional project teams with a lot more communication directly from the top. Most firms we spoke to are reporting reduced layers and a diminished role for middle managers in the new structure, with the digital transformation also happening. We've heard a lot about flexible work arrangements. This could be in the form of work from home, increasing use of part-time gig workers, new modes of communication and interaction. I mean, just today I was reading about Keshav Murugesh from WNS talking about allowing their employees to do other work as in part of their time. Infosys has talked about having as many as 35% of their staff as gig workers in the future once policies and customer contracts catch up to this sort of working. So those are some of the features of the new workplace. In terms of what it means for the workforce, more diversity in skills and talent. Professor Dedes talked about the short shelf life of skills and transient nature of them, and the risk of technological displacements for many kinds of jobs, especially at entry levels. So what are the leadership capabilities this demands? And we can look at this at two levels. One is, what does it mean for early career professionals and entry level workforce? The second is, what does it mean for leadership capabilities? I'm going to focus on the leadership capabilities. Shreyasi, I'll be happy to talk about the early career part of it if time permits later. So based on our research, we looked at 20 capabilities broadly and identified 10 that are important for today's leaders, right? Based on where the world is going. And it's interesting that as we've looked at this research, looked at, talked to companies around the world, there are 5 of these that are bubbling up to be particularly important in the near future. One is building digital fluency across the organization, but especially for leaders to be able to be the driver of transformations within the organizations, navigating complexity, fostering innovation. We spoke about the need for innovation at scale and speed, inspiring engagement in others, and developing our own personal adaptability. I'm not going to go into each one of them. I'll talk for a minute on the last one, the resilience and personal adaptability. What leaders need in such times is not a predefined response plan, but really behaviors and mindset that will prevent them from overreacting to the latest breaking news and help them look ahead. Leaders with the right temperament and character are necessary during these times. You need to be able to look at what's changing and move really nimbly. They stay curious and flexible, but can make tough calls, even if that makes them unpopular. You know, in war times, you want a Winston Churchill and not a Neville Chamberlain. So
Vinay,
those,
thanks. Vinay, can
yeah,
I come in to request you? Thank you so much. And we only have 10, 12 minutes left for a
yeah,
Q&A. So,
Shreyasi, I'm binding up that was the end of it. So
okay.
thank you. Yeah.
Thanks so much for that. Thank you so much. I think fascinating things are very easy to remember as well. Chris, let me go to you to say, I think Vinay painted a really evocative picture of this, this dichotomy between the short term or what sort of the deluge that we have to deal with, as well as fixing your roof on a sunny day, essentially building for the long term, right? I think from a perspective of your work on the 60-year curriculum, which are the 3 skills that you feel will be able to help young professionals as well as leaders with both these contingencies, surviving in the short term and thriving in the long term?
So thank you for asking. I'm going to paste into the chat a brief resource on the 60-year curriculum, because in 10 minutes, we're not going to have time to really explore all of this. But building on what Vinay was saying, I think that organizations, including higher education, are going to need a leadership without followers. It's not just a matter of the leader being resilient. It's a matter of everyone in the organization being resilient, being flexible, understanding the larger context, having a shared vision, and assuming responsibility for making things better rather than waiting for somebody to tell them how to make things better. So that kind of entrepreneurial, creative spirit is going to be very important. There was a question about unlearning in the chat, and part of the challenge with unlearning is it's not just cognitive. People are unlearning an identity. So if we're going to prepare students to do conflict resolution, we have to have conflict that they can practice managing. Conflict in classrooms is something that's typically very frightening for faculty, not something that we would necessarily encourage. So unlearning, a kind of pervasive attitude towards something involves shifting your identity and perhaps thinking of yourself as a suite of skills rather than a role. So if somebody embezzles $40 billion from Harvard and suddenly I find myself out on the street looking for a job, thinking of myself as a faculty member isn't going to be very helpful. There's not going to be a lot of faculty jobs. Thinking of myself as a suite of skills, somebody who can explain complicated things to a wide variety of people, somebody who can listen carefully and be a good mentor, somebody with a lot of social capital who can reach out to many types of people. Now I've got a range of positions that I really could consider. That's part of the unlearning and relearning.
I think that's great. I think you always say such profound things. And I think the 2 things that obviously stand out is a company, a new workplace will essentially be a workplace where there's leaders without followers. So everyone is a leader almost. And then all of these skills must be present in everyone who's working. I think that's a very important point. And I absolutely love the point about thinking of yourself as a suite of skills, and which skills are you adding? Because as you said, in the 60-year curriculum as well, you're going to have not just 5-7 different jobs, but 5 or 7 different careers, and no way that you can build for just that in a career. I'll ask one question of you and then go to Vinay to say, how well do you think higher education systems, whether that's in India or even abroad, or even the United States, are doing on imparting these skills to the young professionals or the graduates that they have in their charge?
I think the two big problems higher education has right now is we're thinking about the first job as if it were the only job. And we're thinking about cognitive knowledge and skills and not thinking enough about dispositions. And both of those are part of a larger question about what business are we in? We're not in the next half century in the business of degrees and courses. We're not in the next half century in the business of schooling and education. We're in the learning business. And learning is in on campus and off campus. It's throughout life. It involves events like this. Until we have a shared vision of being in the learning business, things are not going to go well for higher education.
Okay, when I come in here, I know that at Harvard Publishing, there are several learning and training programs that you have as well, both for corporates as well as for campuses, right? Which are your most popular programs, and are you seeing new demand already happening from campuses with the understanding that there is a set of new skill, a suite of skills, as Chris said, that even young graduates must have?
Yeah. So I think, with young graduates, so Shreyasi, to your first question on what kind of capabilities are we seeing corporates trying to build, I think they align very well to some of the things I mentioned earlier around developing digital fluency, personal adaptability, agility. That's what organizations are focusing on in terms of what they want their leaders to develop. In terms of entry-level professionals, I think the way I think about it is very similar to what Professor Dede said. How do you essentially build a suite of skills, right? And that is, I think of it as soft skills being really important. Of course, hard skills and specialist skills are important, and that's what our university and education system teaches as well. But really, the way to compete with machines and robots and prevent them from taking over your job is to be human, right? So what are those skills that we are uniquely positioned as human beings to bring to the table, and doing things that machines and robots can't do? And ironically, our formal education system doesn't currently pay adequate attention to these. So these are social and emotional intelligence, creativity, communication, leadership, which is about inspiring others and developing others, critical thinking, judgment, learning agility. Carol Dweck talks about the growth mindset that's going to be so important going forward. And, so these are some of the skills that need to complement hard skills, not replace them. I remember Jack Dorsey recently said, AI will eat entry-level coding jobs. And the way to future-proof your career is to get outside being a rote coder, right? So you need to be a coder, but you need to get outside it and develop some of these things that solve real world problems and tackle complex systems thinking, working in teams.
Chris, come in here to say that, how can technology do this? When I was saying that, we need to be more human, and essentially all the skills that all of us are talking about are essentially amplifying, the intelligence aspect of being more human. What role does technology have, and what role can technology play, especially for the audience that we might have, many of them education administrators, they can do to help their students learn these more human skills?
I think that we actually underutilize social media. Social media are a very powerful way that people learn outside of academic settings. And yet we tend to view them in academic settings as just entertainment or family, and not take advantage of the fact that these are powerful learning environments. With Zoom-based instruction, or any other kind of video teleconferencing, complementing that with the social media that students already use to allow collaboration, to allow social capital building is really a good strategy.
Great. We only have time for one last question from each of you, and I request you to keep your answers at 20 seconds each, please. Chris, how can different generations, and different geographies, so for example, in Europe and North America, the workforce might be older. In India and China, the workforce is much younger. And that's a question coming in from the audience, how can institutions as well as organizations navigate this?
Some institutions, notably Georgia Tech and Stanford, are talking about a commitment to their alumni, where once you graduate, you can come back. You have like a voucher to come back for 1 year sometime during your career and just participate again in the intellectual life of the campus. Now, obviously, there's a lot of complexities associated with that, but a tremendous benefit is that when people do that at Harvard, they're mentors for our younger students, but the younger students are also sources of ideas and inspiration for them. So I think there's a lot of cross-generational stuff that we could start doing in higher education instead of firewalling off executive education from continuing education, from early education.
That's a fascinating idea, that your alumni is not just endowment givers or come for keynotes, but they actually become students and they come in and out of the campus many times through their 60-year careers. Very last word to you. That there's a question coming in from the audience. You talked about the character of leadership. Is the character of leadership defined by the values that the leader demonstrates and the impact that the leader has? To you, what does character mean?
To me, character is all about the actions the leader takes, right? I think there's often a lot of talk about values, and in many organizations, we know that these things are values and mission, vision, etc. are on the wall. It's in times like these when your resources are thin and you have your back to the wall. What are the choices the leader makes? And those are reflective of the true values. I think, if your value is about being fair, how are you treating your vendor when you have the power of showing that force majeure clause in your contract and putting them under the bus when you are actually better placed than them? Are you is the top management continue to take those fat salaries and laying off people, knowing well that there are no options out there at present, even though your long-term strategy will require the same skills 1 year down the road? So I think it is the mindset and the actions that leaders are demonstrating now, which reflects the values.
Thank you so much to both of you. We had a bit of a Harvard club here, but fascinating conversation, and we appreciate both of you joining us. Thank you so much, and for everyone else who's on, who attended, thank you for attending. And you have another great session ahead of you. Thank you, Sanjay. Over to you.
Thank you, Shreyasi. Thank you, Professor Dede.
Thank you, Shreyasi. Thank you, Professor Dede and Mr. Hebar. That was a thought-provoking discussion. Skills that we all need to keep an eye out for and keep building throughout this pandemic. On that note, let me quickly move to the next session. Before we jump into our next session, I'd like to point out we have some parallel sessions ongoing right now. On track 1, transitioning to digital, we have an ongoing session on the topic of connect the dots, keeping professional education relevant. In case you're interested in attending this session, please click on the link that has been provided to you in the chat box. This link will take you to track 1. We also parallelly have another session in track 3, leading the front, which is an invite-only track for higher education leaders. This session is on internationalization of higher education, the way forward. In case you're interested in attending this session, please click on the link provided to you in the chat box. This link will take you to track 3. You may be required to enter a password that has been shared with you over email and WhatsApp. On that note, let's move to the second panel discussion on this track today on the topic of stronger together, collaboration across institutions. This session is being chaired by Dr. Pramatraj Sinha. He's the founder and trustee of Ashoka University, founder and chairman of Harappa Education, founding dean of Indian School of Business, and holds a PhD from University of Pennsylvania. We also have Professor Janat Shah join us. He's the director of IIM Udaipur. He has been a professor at IIM Bangalore, visiting faculty at Sloan School of Management, MIT, and is a fellow program in management holder from IIM Ahmedabad. Last but not the least, we have Professor Sarit Das. He's the director of IIT Ropar. He's the editor-in-chief of International Journal of Micro/Nanoscale Transport. He's a fellow at Indian National Academy of Engineering, National Academy of Sciences, India. He also is the former Dean of Academic Research at IIT Madras. Please note this session will run for 30 minutes. We encourage you to send in your questions to us using the Q&A tool on the Zoom platform. On that note, over to you, Pramath.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thanks a lot. Welcome, Professor Das and Professor Shah. It's great to see you both. I wanted to start this off with a bit of a personal anecdote. A lot of people, of course, know me as the founding dean of ISB. And here I am substituting yet again for a dean of ISB. What people don't know is that I was never supposed to be founding dean of ISB. There were two other people who were hired for the job who decided not to take it up after saying yes and joining. And so I became the stand-in dean. I always consider myself the 12th man or the night watchman who came in. So I feel a little bit the same way today. Unfortunately, Raj Srivastav, our current dean of ISB, couldn't be here. And in fact, this idea for this session, the topic for this session, the invitation to both Professor Das and Professor Shah came from Raj, but he really does have a pressing need because of which he couldn't be here. And so in true tradition, 20 years later, I'm again stepping in for a dean of ISB. I think it's good that Raj is not here in the sense that we can then let me not take too much time and speak, but have the two of you speak, and then we can take some questions from the audience. But I think what Raj did intend to have set up in the beginning was this whole idea, because he and I talked about it, is that why is it that more Indian institutions don't collaborate? And shouldn't they be collaborating more? Because a lot of our top institutions are all standalone in a particular field. I've been anchoring the track on track one. There's a discussion going on where a bunch of design school people are talking, right? So Pearl Academy, Srishti, and so on are talking only, and these are all design schools in the tradition of NID and the School of Planning and Architecture. And of course, then we have our IITs and IIMs, which both of you represent. And Raj was saying, hey, why can't we collaborate more across IIT and IIM? I've been talking to Raj for some time about doing an MBA between 1 year at Ashoka University and 1 year at ISB, and maybe doing a liberal arts MBA. And those of you who know, ISB also started with international collaborations with Kellogg and Wharton, though it was in the same field. So I think he was really trying to tee up this discussion. And without further ado, I would like to turn to Professor Das and Professor Shah. I just want to ask both of you, since I haven't had a chance to touch base, that Raj had left me with a series of questions, and I can start with that, or would you like to make any prepared remarks that you already have?
I think you can come with the question. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this first question Raj had was for you, Professor Das. What has been the role of collaboration in IIT Roper's rise up in the research rankings?
See, recent times, particularly last 1 year, you might have seen IIT Roper appearing very frequently in national and international ranking. To just describe a few, last September, we were the top Indian institute along with IISc Bangalore in Times Higher Education world ranking between 300 and 350. Then we became 67th in emerging economy ranking. We were just 2 weeks back, we were 47th in Asia ranking, 25th in national NIRF ranking, And just 2 days back, we are again top in India among young universities, that is universities which are created within last 50 years, 62nd in the world. Now, all these, if you look at, it has come within 1 year doesn't mean something has happened. Really, something has happened 5 years back when we decided that we will have a policy, a complete strategic plan of the institute in which direction it is to take. And that strategic plan, what is interesting, was a collaboration itself between IIM Calcutta and IIT Ropar. The strategic plan of IIT Ropar was made with a professor of IIM Calcutta, Professor Saugata Roy, and we ran one after another, retreats, sessions, workshops, and finally, after a year, it culminated into the strategic plan. And a very important part of that strategic plan was collaborative strategy. See, before this assignment, I was there in IIT Madras as a Dean of Research, where once the Science magazine's chief editor, Bruce Albert, came, and we had a discussion, and I was asking, well, in research, we are getting to top journals, 1B, but we are not heading to 1A. We are not there in Nature, we are not there in Science, we are there in the very next. What is the reason? Bruce said that, well, it's difficult to answer in one word, but I can give you just one sentence answer. You don't know how to collaborate. You just go to a paper in Science or Nature and find out how many people from how many different organizations across how many continents, not even countries, they collaborate to get a paper in Nature. So we understood that right from the beginning and laid down a strategy with the help of a strategic expert in the region, in all areas, but particularly with respect to collaboration. And this is the actual true secret of success of IIT Ropar in last 1 year. So as an opening remark, I would put that the most important thing is a proper strategy. It's not like, because in IIT Madras, I have seen people come, people go, people sign a piece of paper. There are 500 collaborative MOUs, 50 doesn't work. And I told at IIT Ropar to my Dean International Affairs, I do not want 50. I want 500 collaborations. I want 25 collaborations which work. So you must have a strategy. You must be focused. This is the first thing about collaboration.
Wow, that's an amazingly powerful point. I'm so glad that we started off with that, because it's so true that people sign MOUs right, left, and center, and lots of photographs are taken, and the papers being exchanged, and you feel like they are country presidents signing agreements. Professor Shah, it's good to see you. We've spoken on the phone many times, but the question to you is, what is the scope for collaboration between institutions within India, and what has been your experience within the IIM system?
So, it's an interesting question, Pramod, because, we've been here for a long time. Calcutta and Ahmedabad has been for almost 60 years. And even younger institution like us has been for 9 years. And as you started by saying, we're a standalone institution, right? IIMs are a standalone institution. And there are two characteristics which are important for, I think, all Indian institutions. One, a lot of premium institutions in India have been standalone, like IIT, IIMs, you talked about design, law, architecture, and a lot of great work. You need to do it in terms of interdisciplinary. So I think there is a need because we are a standalone institution. Second, we're also small. I think we need to recognize most of our institutions are small. So if you want to do anything across, you should try and pull across. Now, when you look at this and see a history of IIMs, to start with. We find only area where we have really collaborated well is admission. IITs also do that. We are all known for our admission test. But beyond that, we have not collaborated very well. There are islands, there are few cases where we have interesting area where, institutions have collaborated. You talked about IIT IM. IIM Calcutta, for example, has this great program, Leadership in Manufacturing, which actually has stood test of time, is a collaboration involving 3 institutions, IIM Calcutta, IIT Kanpur, and IIT Madras. And the reason, I think, as Sarit mentioned, there was a purpose, there was a need, because both were bringing different parts in terms of what they were bringing to table, and it has stood test of time. That's one great example of collaboration across institutions. Similarly, Calcutta now has one more program where they do work with ISI and IIT Kharagpur in business analytics. But beyond that, we haven't had a great success. There's another area we have done something is in the PhD program. This whole issue that each of us is a relatively smaller institution, not able to support great PhD program. So there's been conversation across institution, but only last few years, finally, at least ABC has put some act together and saying at least one semester we'll collaborate. So I think it's an interesting question in terms of why are we so poor at collaboration, even though we need collaboration. So I'll just give you 2 more examples. For example, IIT Bangalore had a program with MIT. They came up with a joint executive education, and within 2 years, it didn't go forward. Okay. And again, we can actually look at why it works, why it doesn't work. And I'll just give you 2 more examples from IIM Udaipur. We have one program with Purdue, which seems to have again stood test of time on a supply chain management and something which we've been doing it for 8 years. While in incubation center, we have an incubation center where we try to say that we must have a technology partner, and we try and reach out to one of the bigger IIT and it didn't work. So I think so in general, we haven't done a great job. There have been few success stories. There have been a lot of failures. Like as Sarit mentioned, I think at IIM Bangalore also would have signed a lot of MOUs. I mean, it'll be interesting to see that a lot of lessons we have from literature, that what makes collaboration work. But somehow I think as an institution, we've not kept that in mind. The learning of, one of the learning which Sarit talked about is you have to have a strategy and a purpose, right? Whenever that is not there, it doesn't work. But I think it's possible to look at literature of what makes collaborative work, look at all these examples, and I think maybe we can chalk out saying, I think these are the best practices we need to keep in mind to make sure collaboration works. So let me stop here and yeah.
No, that's very helpful. And I agree with you that, it's really having the strategy, knowing what works and what doesn't work, but then actually making it happen is really where the rubber kind of meets the road. Let me turn back to Professor Das and ask you, what is your sense of the scope for international collaborations? I mean, I feel like there was a time when there used to be a lot of these collaborations and they used to be looked down upon because they were all with some C grade, D grade institutions, and there was a little bit of a scam going on. Then I think there were fewer such, once that cleanup happened, I think there was a cleanup. Then there were some fewer collaborations, but higher quality. But then are there enough? Is there scope? What is your sense?
See, you said very correctly that, and I think this should be a part of your strategy, that, how do you collaborate? With whom do you collaborate? This C grade, D grade universities, etc. See, I take it up in 3 levels. One, individual level. Another, department or section level, another institute level. And the rule of engagement for the three levels are quite different. Individual level, you look at only complementarity. You look at by working with whom I can be benefited, who are working in my area, who are interesting people, and so on. It doesn't matter where he is. He may be a very reputed person, because in America or even in Europe, it happens that a very reputed person suddenly goes from a top school to a mediocre school because he is given huge amount of money or a big position. So they do that. They keep on migrating. So individual collaboration is based on the person. It doesn't matter in which school he is. When it comes to the institute level, the other end, we must find out an institute of your level who have got interest in you. Now, I will give you an example, this judgment, how it works and how it worked beautifully for IIT Ropar. It's a coincidence, of course, that 2 days back, when this young university ranking was announced, we were at 62 position, tied with another university. And the name of that university is Swinburne University in Australia. But what is very interesting, last year, we started our first joint PhD program with Swinburne University. That means, you see, it's not a coincidence. Actually, we judge that this university is of our level. It could have been 65 or could have been, 52, but we are in the same, band. So when you collaborate with, because only those universities will have interest in you. Now you come to the other one. Does it mean that we will only collaborate with the people of our level? Will IIT Ropar not try to collaborate with MIT or Cambridge? Well, yes, but the question is why MIT should do it with me? They can do for two reasons. One, simply for money. If you say I have $100 million, any university in the world will collaborate with you, right? But the thing is, from there you won't get anything because they just want your money. I can tell you that KFUPM, King Fahd University of Petroleum and Mining, has got a huge collaboration with MIT. And it happened when I was there in MIT as a visiting professor, and I know how it went. It's just the money. So if you want to collaborate with MIT or Cambridge or these kinds of university, you can do it this way. Find out one section, one department, which is interesting to you and who are interested in you. Don't go for MIT. So IIT Ropar signed an agreement last year with MIT Water and Food Program. Just that, not anything else, not the whole of MIT. We actually got two projects now going together and working very well. So they became interested because they looked at the potential of IIT Ropar's work in food and water. Because we are in Punjab, they will get a very, very large sample here in the agricultural field and all that. So they developed some interest. The same thing we did with Cambridge. We have a collaboration with Cambridge and joint projects in only supply chain management, nothing else with Cambridge, only that. So 3 levels of engagement. One is individual basis, one is section basis, and one is institution basis. But the most important thing which comes next to that is, okay, you identify it, you talk to them. The name of the game is follow up. See, you meet once. What we do, we meet, go there, we meet once. Sometimes we sign a paper, sometimes we don't. It doesn't matter. But when we come back, what do? Typically what IIT Ropar does, they make a team of youngsters who wants to collaborate. They talk to them over email, etc. And then this team at our own cost is sent there. They sit there for 7 days because collaborations happens over a cup of coffee, even a glass of beer, or an evening invite. So it starts from there, And you need to identify the financial resources. This is extremely important. Just good feeling and good intentions don't work. Collaboration requires money. And there are money, actually. There are n number of government to government collaborations which we do not explore. India governments, almost every week, one advertisement announcement comes up. We have got specific programs with Canada. We have got specific programs with United States. And there are no takers, in fact, believe it. So identifying these resources and let it be identified by both the team together. This should be the thing, right? You saw institution level and department level collaborations you identify, you go back, do homework, send the team, and then come out with a clear idea about the resources, financial and other resources, and then go ahead. I would say, these are the things which must be there in the collaboration.
Very nice. I think Professor Shah, you should do Professor Das, you should do a master class on how to do collaborations, institutional collaborations. That's brilliant. Professor Shah, is there scope for IIMs to do collaborations? Like in general, do you feel that there is scope where IIMs can collaborate and help other institutions? And another question that has come in from the audience, and I'm kind of shifting gears also to that a little bit to take some of their questions. Is there a roadmap where institutions should mentor other institutions?
So I think first, the collaboration, I think, so for example, let me just take an example of the digital. We have a Center for Digital Enterprise. Okay. And we identified that as one area we want to do something. But immediately we realize that unless we partner with a law institution, because there's a lot of data privacy related issues, and if you do not partner with a technology institution, it's not going to go too far. So I think there is a saying that if you really want to make an impact, we will have to collaborate. Second, similarly, if you want to really talk about, as Sarit talked about, saying, if I want to really make an impact at a high quality journals, I think we will have to do collaboration with, research institution. But there we'll have to ask this question, what do we bring to the table? If you're able to bring some two kinds of things, we're able to bring some innovative data, right? So there are data which are very interesting data. So I think that question in a collaboration will have to be, both parties will have to win. And what do we bring to the table? And I think that's what we're trying to answer. That unless we bring with a value proposition with the law school and with the technology school, that what do they gain and what do we gain? We think we'll definitely gain. So we're trying to put together there. Similarly, right now we are asking this question from research institution, that on one hand, we are very young, highly research, the test who have gone through a good program, the young researcher pool, and certain areas where you have data. And we are saying, can we use this as a mechanism to build certain partnership? So I think it's going back to saying you have to say, where do they add value? Either it has to be complementary skills in a way it add values to both, or somewhere, or again, in terms of saying you're bringing unique data, or somewhere saying both of us do not have a critical mass, for example, this PhD program. So there has to be a sense, somewhere a logic which will drive the collaboration. And then obviously the other principles in terms of saying that don't make it a people-centric. Initially, we'll start with our champions, but finally we'll have to institutionalize it. So I think we have certain ideas which we hope to put in place and say, okay, this is the way we will make collaboration work. But sense of purpose and logic will have to come in. Come to this idea in terms of mentoring. I think, there is a role which we have to play. If we talk about bringing quality of institutions, improving quality of institution. And I think that's where technology, a lot of ideas which are discussed in this conference also, that I think there is a role as a mentor institution we can play and we must play. But how do we do it in a way that we make it cost efficient, don't make it, resource intensive. So I think there is a need for it. For example, if there are institutions in Rajasthan where we should play a mentoring role, right? But they also should bring into table in terms of what are they trying to do something in terms of intent, in terms of investment they want to make, commitment on the faculty side. So I think collaboration of one, which is going to help us, and second, where we will help. Both are possible, but a lot of those principles which we talked about in this session, we'll have to bring it.
No, thank you. That's very comprehensive. Professor Das, you want to react to the mentoring point also?
Yeah, mentoring and also coming up with new ideas, absolutely new ideas. Mentoring in the sense, why is this, madness about IITs? I call it a madness because I didn't study in IIT, but I'm able to be a director of IIT. The madness is about that, the gap, the difference. You see a distinct gap between IIT and the next level, and the next level and the next level. Now, unless you can make it continuous, if you look at any developed country, go to Germany, go to US, it's almost a continuous distribution, right? So yeah, there are Harvards and UCLA, but there are also a number of colleges which are as good and which are next to it. We don't have it. The next level is not able to come, and so I think it should be made mandatory for every, 23 IITs. IITs are not there just to become excellent themselves, because you see, IITs will never become excellent if they try themselves, because we know today to become top university what you need research scholars, right? IIT BTechs don't come for masters in IIT. Everybody knows. IIT MTechs don't come for PhD at IIT. Everybody knows. So then where your PhD is going to come from? They are going to come from the next level. And if the next level is much below, you can never produce the top class. I can tell you one very interesting conversation with me and Mary Boyce. Mary Boyce was the first woman mechanical engineering head of MIT. She is now the dean of Columbia University. Now, when I was leaving MIT, though, Mary asked me that, what is your opinion about our students? I said, your PhD students are fantastic. And she said, that's because they come from all over the world. What about master student? I said, your master students are very good. Because they come from all over the world and all over America. And then she said, what about our bachelor students? I said, they are much inferior than IIT Madras. So she said, immediately asked, I agree, but what is the reason? I said, because your school level mathematics is horrible in America. I told on the face. Now, this is true. The thing is that, if we really want to promote our next level, the whole education system, it cannot remain like that. In their own interest itself, IIT should mentor the other institutions. And the other point of view that I want to put is, see, today, due to this COVID, you look at the possibility and the need for biology to work with engineering. You have to have a number of things which should come up out of technology. And for that, we need to have programs like what in US they have got, the MD PhD program, for example. A person does MD and PhD together, MD in medicine and PhD in whatever area, related area they take. And how they collaborate, very interesting. The MIT doesn't have a medical school. Harvard has got, and they are in the same city of Cambridge. So this MD PhD is given by Harvard and MIT together. You do the MD at Harvard Medical School and PhD at MIT. Emory University and Georgia Tech also have got the same thing. So I am thinking of IIT Ropar and PGI Chandigarh can have an MD PhD. We have started discussion on that. So we need to also think this way, collaboration in this particular way.
One of our attendees has given the suggestion that for Atmanirbhar Bharat, domestic institutions should collaborate. Unfortunately, we are out of time. And I do want to thank you both for joining us. We were supposed to wrap up by 5:40. So I hope you had a chance to, I think we had a great set of inputs from both of you, and we had an audience of about 100 people attending, so they would have really benefited from this. We have a session starting in a few minutes as a keynote with Dr. Rick Levin, the former Yale president and the former Coursera CEO. So please do join us, and it's on track 1. But thank you so much for joining us, and I hope I did a good substitute for
Thank you,
Raj.
Pramod. You did a great job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. For the audience who are here, please join us on track 1. There's a keynote address by Professor Rick Levin, formerly the president of Yale University, as well as the former CEO of Coursera. And he will be starting there in a few minutes at 5:45 p.m. So please join us on track 1. The link to go there is in your chat box. So just click on the link and you will be automatically transported over there, and you can come back to track 2 at about 6:15 when that session gets over. Thank you so much for joining us, and see you soon on the other track.
Good afternoon, everyone. Like Pramath mentioned, we have a keynote address currently starting on track 1. This address is on the topic of after COVID-19, the future of online education by Dr. Rick Levin. He is the former CEO of Coursera and the former president of Yale University. This session is being moderated by Mr. Ashish Dhawan, who's the founder and chairman of the board of trustees at Ashoka University. In case you're interested in attending this session, please click on the link that has been provided to you in the chat box. This link will take you to track 1, where the keynote address has just started. Do note that we will begin with our next and the final panel discussion of this track at about 6:20 p.m. See you soon. Good evening, everyone. Just to point out, we have a keynote address that is currently underway on track 1 on the topic of after COVID-19, the future of online education. This session is being delivered by Dr. Levin. He has been the CEO of Coursera and has been the president of Yale University. The session is being moderated by Mr. Ashish Dhawan, who's the founder and chairman of the board of trustees at Ashoka University. In case you're interested in attending this session, please click on the link that has been provided to you in the chat box. This link will take you to track 1, where the keynote address is currently underway. Please note the keynote address will only be visible on track 1. We will come back to this track for our final panel discussion at about 6:20 p.m. on the topic of gender and diversity, tackling intersectional vulnerabilities. See you soon. Good evening, everyone. We will be beginning our next session shortly. Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to track 2 of the Republic of Letters, the Resilient Institution. Before we begin the final session on this track, I'd like to inform you about the parallel sessions that we have running right now. We have a session on will regulations, accreditation, and rankings keep up on track 1, which is transitioning to digital. In case you're interested in attending this session, please click on the link that has been provided to you in the chat box. This link will take you to track 1, where you can access this session. We also have a session on re-engineering engineering colleges, which is a part of track 3 under the leading from the front track, which is an invite-only track for higher education leaders. In case you're interested in attending this session, please click on the link that has been provided to you in the chat box. This link will take you to track 3. You may be required to put in a password that was shared with you over email and WhatsApp. So without much ado, let me quickly begin the last session of this track and in this conference, a panel discussion on gender and diversity, tackling intersectional vulnerabilities. This session is being chaired by Dr. Vijay Lakshmi Nanda. She's the acting principal of Miranda House College. She is the associate professor, Department of Political Science at Miranda House. She's the recipient of the ICSSR Doctoral Fellowship, and she holds a PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Our other panelist today is Dr. Padmaja Mishra. She's the Vice Chancellor of Ramadevi University. She has been an officer on special duty at Ramadevi University and a professor of economics at Utkal University. She has been a recipient of Commonwealth Fellowship, World Bank Fellowship, as well as South Asian Research Fellowship. Last but not the least, we have Professor Anita Ghai. She's the professor of School of Humanities Studies at Ambedkar University. She has been the director of Indian Association of Women's Studies and the author of Disability Studies in South Asia, Knowledge and Experience. Also, she has been a fellow at Nehru Memorial Museum Library. This session will run for 30 minutes. We encourage all of you to please send us questions using the Q&A tool on the Zoom platform. On that note, over to you, Ms. Dr. Nanda.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjay, for this opportunity, as well as thanks to Ashoka, as well as Harappa University. I would also like to welcome my panelists here. They are experts in their field, and without taking much time in this particular session, I would like to bring in a PowerPoint that I've made in order to set the context. So I would like you to share the PowerPoint if you have it with you, Sanjay. If you could share this PowerPoint.
Yes, 1 second.
Should I continue with my discussion, or are you going to be okay here? So I'll just take you through the context of why we have this particular title for this session. We have had a number of sessions, and being the last session, I'm sure there has been a lot of overlap. To the next slide, please. To the next slide. So while I set the context, I would be looking at gender and diversity in terms of tackling intersectional vulnerabilities, which is an ongoing and unfinished project. It is not something that the COVID has sprung up on us. It is something that we are continuously doing. And the idea of a harmonious and homogeneous community is a myth, especially within the educational sector. And there is a need to engage with differences in terms of access to opportunities, resources, with a definite handle on vulnerabilities. We speak about ethics, about equity, justice, and empathy, but they only become tangible if you are going to be engaging with access to opportunities and resources, looking at intersectional vulnerabilities. And resilience of any institution, pre-COVID, post-COVID, during the COVID, needs to be based on a commitment to gender and diversity. The next slide. Now, two of my panelists who are here will be emphasizing on this. We are looking at the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on learning. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to an emphasis on online classes in educational institutions for a greater good, and the greater good being that you're trying to prevent a particular pandemic. The exposure to online teaching because of physical distancing norms provides us both with challenges, and we are aware of the challenge. It's a huge public health crisis, apart from the fact that we have to continue teaching and learning, and the opportunities to engage with the nuances of gender and diversity in terms of the immediate intersectional vulnerabilities. And this engagement needs to be delivered on the basis of a quantitative gender and diversity sensitive indicators. We need to look at what are the quantitative issues. I mean, how many people are able to access the resources, in which ways they are able to access it. So that is a very important one. Qualitative, gender sensitive indicators, the best practices in the field, the whole host of knowledge that you're gathering right now becomes the best practices in the field. And that becomes important. Then capacity building of the enablers, and that includes the faculty members, the administrative staff, as well as administrative leaders who are there in this field. So that becomes an important one. Next slide. I am going to now engage, and the panelists are going to give shed light on this, the geographical and power location in terms of access of intersectional vulnerability. Now, there is a grid in which all universities are located. You have the global universities, you have the regional, you have the public, you have the private. So where are you located in that grid? Where are you located geographically? Regionally, where are you located? These are also important access of intersectional vulnerability. Then, community, other kinds of disabilities. Now, when you are looking at re-engaging or even engaging with online resources, the norm is of the able and the capable. And we need to bring in disability and capacity into it. And Professor Anita Ghai is definitely going to shed more light on this. In terms of addressing gender vulnerabilities, I think we need to look at how the public and the private divide has been intermeshed now. This enmeshing has happened. You now have a virtual workplace, and the virtual workplace is within the home. And therefore, you're looking at domestic violence, you're looking at online sexual harassment, you're looking at huge caregiving and domestic roles for women, which is overlapping. And how does the workplace come in there to provide a gender sensitive policy within? We need to look at economic barriers in terms of accessibility, availability, and affordability. These are also issues that the panelists are going to engage with, and I would welcome them to talk a little more on this. The next. Now, I'm going to take up two ideas and I leave it to the panelists to discuss around it. One is Michael Walzer's idea from the Spheres of Justice, written in 1983, the idea of complex equality, where when you are engaging with an issue, your inequality in a particular field, whether it is disability or it is gender, should not impact your access in another field. It should not bring about inequality in another field. Here in the online resources, how do you look at that? How do you engage with that intersectional overlap is something. The other is, of course, this writing by Nassim Taleb, which is a very important writing. The name of the book is Anti-Fragile, and I think I'll pick up the book for you. Anti-Fragile, Things That Gain from Disorder. Very interesting writing where he looks at this triad of fragility. Fragility always wants tranquility, it wants status quo, and it is afraid to break down. Then there is the robust or the resilient, which maintains itself and stands firm. Then there is the anti-fragility. And he says that there are certain things when they break down, and the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us a breakdown of what used to be, and you call it the new normal, but it is a breakdown. And how are we going to gain from this disorder? That is something we can shed light on. The next slide. The next slide. Now, I think blended learning is here to stay, and we need to engage with it. There is definite gains for collaboration, for partnership, for the kind of webinars we are doing here, networking, cross-learning, embedded learning. So these are important issues. Participatory decision-making, there's a global and regional outreach. However, we do see it's not a substitute for the vibrant human connections in physical environment. But how do you equalize blended learning? And that should be the purpose of this panel. I will now ask Dr. Padmaja Mishra to come in and discuss from her experiential stance of being the Vice Chancellor of Ramadevi University with a whole host of colleges under her. So welcome, Dr. Mishra. Please take. I think she needs to be unmuted. You need to be unmuted. Right.
Hello. Can you hear me now? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you, Dr. Mishra.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Vijayalakshmi. Thank you very much. I thank the organizers for giving us this opportunity to be in the panel and share our views. And this panel is on gender diversity and intersectionality. And Vijayalakshmi has taken a lot of trouble of bringing us together to discuss on this. Thank you again. What you presented now, I think these are the basic salient points that we should discuss on gender issues in this COVID-19 scenario. So you and all of us, I think all the participants, we have been discussing about this since COVID-19 started. But in this 3 days Republic of Letters, in this conference, we have been listening to so many learned speakers, and they all talked about so many important things that we learned actually. But actually, what is the practical experience we must discuss in context of gender diversity and the disadvantages or the experiences, I would say, not always disadvantages, but differential experiences. As you know, higher education in COVID-19 scenario, all the sectors, there has been huge recession worldwide, but higher education system is not an exception. We have recession in higher education as well. Higher education institutions, you will know that in this knowledge economy, higher education institution has a very important role to play because we influence and lead as higher education institutions. Education influences and leads, and that's not just for the present but for the future also. It shapes actually the socio-cultural behavioral norms. We are entering into a new normal situation, as we have always been discussing in all the panels. But higher education systems are very important. But I must tell you here, I must say that these institutions are very heterogeneous, not a homogeneous group. The institutions are heterogeneous, as well as the students also are heterogeneous groups. And gender is one of the important dimensions. The institutions are heterogeneous in the sense that there are public, private, central, state, technical, general, and we are in the track resilient institutions. So the main thing is how to make our institutions resilient, whatever type of institution we are, and whether we cope with this abnormal, uncertain situation or we crumble. Obviously, we would all try to cope with it. And gender diversity and intersectionality, when it comes in as an issue which should be tackled at the institutional level, I think that's very, very important in the sense that we all know that a student group, when I said they are heterogeneous groups, so the gender that forms one group on the basis of gender, I would say, male students or female students. But fortunately or unfortunately, it cuts across so many different things, and the intersectionality question arises because there are groupism. They can be placed into different groups in context of their location, their race, class, caste, their socioeconomic situation, their political affiliation. So there are so many different dimensions in which students are placed, and the gender dimension interacts with all these dimensions, and it makes the whole situation so complex and the impact so cumulative. The impact of COVID-19 situation, whether it is during COVID or post-COVID, we are mostly discussing preparing ourselves for the post-COVID scenario. So the situation becomes so complex and cumulative that if there is any kind of marginalization and vulnerabilities, then it adds to all other socioeconomic stressors. There has been a lot of socioeconomic stress due to this uncertain situation that we all faced. But this dimension with which gender interacts, and there is a huge intersectionality. So I would like to say that any kind of advantage, particularly disadvantage, we should rather focus on. It adds to other stressors, and the situation has become very, very stressful for the groups of students for on the basis of gender and the diversity amongst them also, and the intersectionality, for which I said the impact has been cumulative. For example, if a girl is located in a rural scenario, in a rural location where there is no connectivity, we could not connect her. We simply could not connect her. If we want to teach something, if we have impacts of information, because it was so sudden and uncertain. So I would say that there are different aspects, different dimensions by which a student can be disadvantaged. And gender is one of the important dimensions which, cutting across all these parameters, makes the situation more complex, more sensitive, and more vulnerability may appear because of all these situations. So the new norms of the new normal situation that we are thinking of, for example, the new pedagogy that we are thinking of, because we have to teach, the learners have to learn, the students are entitled to learn. And as institutions, as teachers or as institutional leaders, we must focus on the new things that we are trying to bring in. For example, new pedagogy, as everybody has talked about digital world, online pedagogy, or Vijayalakshmi has said that different kinds of hybrid technology, blend hybrid pedagogy, digital learning, digital technology, and so many different things that these are being discussed. But the main thing is that the accessibility by the student. So if the student is not being able to access all these, because accessibility has been very much discussed, because we know that digital connectivity is not perfect. So because of lack of connectivity, students' accessibility has been hampered, has also hampered learning during these COVID times, may also hamper in post-COVID time also. But what we know that digital world, but what I'm trying to say is that it is not just acceptability, it is not just accessibility, but the acceptability of the student. We never discuss about acceptability of the student, what we offer, whether that can be accepted by the student, even if the student accesses the digital learning platform, because there is connectivity, but may not accept that learning platform, because it doesn't only involve technological instruments, but a technical mindset or an acceptable mindset. So we cannot overnight change that mindset. And it has already been said that digital learning or online learning cannot replace classroom learning. There must be a human element to teaching learning process, which is lacking in the digital learning platform mostly. So I would rather focus on acceptability of the student, and student being at the center. What the student necessitates, what is the choice and freedom for the student, and how she finally accepts what as an institution we offer. For example, this digital thing, it has to come in. We cannot do away with online learning or digital learning. We have in Odisha, I would say, that we have already introduced in the next academics, for the next academic session, that 25% should be self-study. So self-study is one important aspect of a substitute, or not exactly a substitute, as the complementary of the classroom teaching. We are not going to make 100% distance learning, because we are institution, we have to invite students to the classroom. We cannot stay away from the students for all future to come. Then that doesn't make any sense for the institutions to exist or survive. So we survive for the students. They are the important stakeholders, the most important stakeholders. So they should be at the center. They should be asked first. I mean, there must be a system to know what is the necessity of the students, what the student will accept, and what is her choice, and what kind of freedom of choice we are offering. So there has to be blended learning. That is the answer. But what kind of blending of what are the components of that blended thing, that every institution has to customize that according to
Thank
different
you,
groups.
Professor Mishra.
And I just want to say one more thing, that no student should feel deprived, because deprivation to me, as per Amartya Sen's poverty definition, like that, deprivation is lack of capability, nothing else but
I
lack of
agree.
capability. So institutional capability as well as student capability, both the things should be combined in a proper mix together. Then only we can do some justice to this teaching learning process. Thank you very much.
Significant points, Dr. Mishra, very significant points. Student acceptability, the idea of looking at negotiations within that, and the idea of capacity and capabilities of Amartya Sen. I now bring in my friend, good friend, Professor Anita Ghai, to speak on her area of interest and experience. So over to you, Professor Ghai.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate the Ashoka University and the organizers and Dr. Nanda and Dr. Mishra. I think what really concerns me is the issue of disability. And I just want to say that disability is largely thought of as, medical construction, where we think about only the fact that it's either a concessional category, or we always think that, only the doctors would kind of, cure them. And instead of care, the cure, hypothesis is always there. And often, the kind of labels that I just, kind of want to say, that the cultural ethos are basically langda, crippled, andha, blind, or behra, or pagal, and somewhere the assumption of label is the naturalness is unquestioned, and actually it indicates failure. Now, when I think about higher education has, in fact, even when I think about COVID, I mean, from March onwards, our struggle has been to show our presence somewhere so that, they would think about it, and higher education, I think, has been abdicating the responsibilities right from not only at the time of the COVID, it has been doing it before also, and in that particular sense, to have disabled children, disabled students in the universities is always a issue that we've got to kind of, negotiate with. And I find that there are, even if in a reserved quota, if there are 1,500 seats, we actually get almost 700 seats where, the students come up, because there's a disconnect between the school and the university, because people have to first pass their class 12th, only then they will come to the university and then use the reservation which is there. So I think higher education also has another issue, because, earlier when we used to think about the, gender, we never used to, we used to really, ask for how women will be identified and women would be indicated. But it was only in the late, 70s when we actually brought in gender as part of the academia, as an epistemic, category. But I find that disability has no such, epistemic location. They only think that, well, we can only give them this much, and with Tara, and then that will be, enough. Now, one thing which I want to pick up is from, what Dr. Mishra also said about the digital. I have no problem with the online. In fact, reasonable accommodation where you can be at home is better also. But I think I'm very concerned about the students, especially, two categories at least. In fact, all the categories, I would say, where, visually impaired, the screen readers, where we say that we have actually can read all the websites which are there, and if we have the lecture also, is that lecture good enough for people to be kind of reading it? Is it accessible? Normally they keep the recorders with them and they, take that recorder and they do that. But now that this is very, very difficult, of course, they can send the recordings and all. But I think the, software such as JAWS, which is very expensive, they often only get the corrupt JAWS, or they have NVC or other this thing. But the idea is that, okay, you can get the text, and it will be transferred into this thing. But, when the images come, like, so for example, you want to show the mountain, or you want to kind of show, what exactly, how the road is or whatever. Now there the images will not be there even in the software itself, So they can do for both Braille as well as this one. But the idea is that how do we scan all the books that are there? I mean, is it possible that we should just simply tell them 25% self-study, but do they have that much enough which could be studied at every level and it could be scanned? Do all the libraries have those scanners where they could kind of, translate it into, whatever the software is? And also for the deaf people, and very few deaf people come in because, the sign language in itself is not there. We never think, you might have seen at the time of COVID, many other presidents and all are, actually they have an interpreter who's trying to, but our Prime Minister does not really take that into consideration. It's never there that Honorable Modi ji is saying something and the deaf people actually can really use the sign language which is there from that. But sign language for the higher education, this thing is very critical. We must have that, So when I talk about online classes, we also talk about the resources also. What are, and I should kind of say that class, caste, rural, urban, the intersectional areas, the intersectional categories. Do we have enough money in which we can give smartphones and laptops with the JAWS software, which is, 3 JAWS software for 1 lakh rupees, Now, do we have those many resources that we can address the concerns of students with disabilities? And I would say not only the students, even my fellow faculty members, they also go through the same kind of problem when they do not have a particular book, which is part of the course, and they've not been able to scan it, then it will be difficult. In the conclusion, I would say that disability, one should understand it like this, is temporarily able-bodiedness. It's not as if disability happens only to some people, because we always believe that there is a karma, retribution for past sin. But I always say that whether it is the landmines, whether it's the bomb blast, whether it's the China and India a problem that's happening right now, what is happening is that disability can happen to anyone at any particular point in time. So I think, and accidents in Delhi, every 3 minutes we have an accident. So I think we need to really think about the disability, and we have to think about knowledge as an epistemology and not just simply as a concession category. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I think that's very well put. We have gone through some important points here in terms of resource allocation, in terms of looking at an epistemic category of knowledge for disability, as well as acceptability, deprivation, and capability coming in from Dr. Mishra's point. I would also like to contextualize that we are not speaking of gender in binaries. We're looking at the fluidity of gender in all categories. And when we're looking at disability, we're not just looking at women. We are looking at all bodies which are disabled. So the diversity was to bring in that. So I thank you again, panelists, and over to you for the questions, please. May we have some questions? We have about, I think, 3-4 minutes. So can we have the questions? 2 minutes by my watch. Yes, Sanjay, over to you.
Dr. Nanda, we have sent you the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you see the questions? You would like to, I just read out some of the questions for you. One is saying, why are we talking about gender as a binary? Would you like to take that, Anita?
Yeah, I don't think it should be like she said, it should be more than binary, because we also believe that there's a third gender also, right? So we believe that there are, weaker gender, can men also be there, or the LGBT, or disabled, So there are all kinds of categories that would be part of the gender. So we must always say that there is a multiplicity that is there, which should be considered, right?
Okay, so there's one question I want Dr. Mishra, it is, I think, directed at you. What kind of strategies can be taken to promote acceptability of digital learning among students? How far a good pedagogical framework will impact student performance in the post-COVID era?
Yeah, I believe that this online teaching, or what we call the digital learning, that is here to stay. We cannot do away with that. We know that digitalization divides between rural, urban, those who can access, those who cannot access. But let us use this digital opportunity for empowering. Digitalization empowers also. Technology empowers. Technology doesn't divide only. So technology empowers. So we can use this technology to empower these disadvantaged sections, whether it is man or woman or any kind of disadvantage they are placed in. So that we can do. So what we need to do as an institution, that we need to collect the voices of the students. We need to have some framework to collect the advantages and disadvantages, exact necessities, and frame our strategy accordingly, because ultimately we know that true change begins when all voices are heard. So we need to hear all the voices, then only true change can happen, and that true change, I'm very hopeful, that will empower the students.
Thank you. Thank you. There is one more. Do we have time for more,
Can I
Sanjay?
take it?
Yes, we can take another question or
That's
two.
important.
Okay. So there is a question
I
that
do think
yeah,
that
okay,
the
Anita.
online classes, because we've been thinking about domestic violence so much, we've been really thinking about these issues. So I think they are, but I'm not saying that gender means only girls. Gender means everyone, right? That's what we've said, the fluidity, of the body in that particular sense. But yes, you're right, because when women, when girls come are at home, the mothers will automatically, and I don't want to say mothers also, I would say that at home they really are asked to kind of, take up the work, homework, household work, which is there. And they probably don't ask the boys to do that, And I think that kind of a change is very, very important for us to bring it, so that somewhere, the knowledge, it should not be as if the lack of awareness should be there. It should be there for all of them, both boys as well as girls,
Right,
So I
right.
don't think we need to distinguish between.
That's right. I understand. We are not really seeing it as a binary. There are two quick questions that I'll just do this. One, which says that the classroom in a public institution is a great equalizer, but and you do move away from inequalities of class, caste, gender. However, in this context, when you're coming to self-learning, it might reproduce inequalities. So how do you overcome that? It's a good question. I'll just add one more to this. There's a question which says that how far have we moved as far as gender intersectionality is concerned? How far have we moved in that? I mean, therein you can, so maybe Padmaja, and you can begin, and then Padmaja.
The way I understand, I think intersection is basically way in which we can problematize many of the categories. If I say disability is intersecting with class, disability is intersecting with caste, with culture, so there could be many, but the first idea is that, of course, we are, at least naming it, and the naming of intersectional category is important.
As an epistemic knowledge, I think it's an important one.
Yeah, otherwise we'll never think about it, okay? But secondly, I forgot the second. Yeah, I think this equality is not there, because if, the visually impaired students have had to go to the court for an exam in a university, then I think we are not really doing equal part, So, in that particular sense, they really are trying to tell them that we cannot take this open book test or whatever, So I think that is something which is very, very serious. And online classes for me, I mean, like Dr. Nanda said, that, the face-to-face interaction, of course, because I've taught for almost, 38 years now, I wouldn't kind of, enjoy online all the time. But I can see that it does give you some, way in which, you can. But for that, we will have to first give the resources to the students, whether it comes from the university or UGC or wherever. I mean, I don't care. But the idea is that they should have the facilities that they can use. And then I think we can really think about the online.
But Dr. Mishra, your
I
last
just
words.
want to add one more thing, that gender is placed differently when we talk about the classroom and when talk about off the classroom. Okay, when they are studying at home, self-study at home or home study, gender is placed very, very differently. So we have to recognize that and we have to neutralize that. As Anita said, what are the resources and what is the procedure? What is the strategy? What are the materials? What is the technology that we are going to use? So we have to neutralize that differential effect. A girl at home studying should not face the disadvantages which she usually faces. As Anita says, the mother will ask her to cook. So,
Right.
so these things, that is why I said education has a very important role to play to change the attitude now, to change into a new normal. New norms has to set in for the present generation and for the future generation also. So it empowers. So what I believe in, I'm a very positivist. I think that the situation actually empowers all of us. Those who are at a disadvantaged situation, may it be due to gender or some kind of disability, then let us use the technology and the new norms of teaching learning procedure to empower the student, and it has to be custom made. We cannot generalize that. We
I
cannot.
agree. I agree.
Can I just say one last thing? You know,
Yes, yes, please, Anita.
The finance minister said that disabled people can get 1,000 rupees in free, whatever, 3 months. 1,000 rupees in 3. So that means you have to go thrice for 1,000 rupees, which is your
installments.
The finance, that is there. So you can imagine with these kind of resources, what will they do? I mean, if part of the education also, how much will be given to them? 10 rupees or 20 rupees, that kind of a thing.
Absolutely.
So we really need to think.
It has, Vijayalakshmi, it has huge time and money implications.
Yes,
Time use and money
absolutely.
implications. And that has to be taken into account when we form a strategy as an institution to cope and to be called a resilient institution.
Absolutely. I think the recommendations from this panel is very clear, Sanjay. The idea is that resource allocation is the major issue here, and we need to look at resource allocation in terms of intersectionality and as well as participatory, decisions. And participatory decisions is student-centric. I think it's a very, very interesting panel. We'll all agree that they have brought in very provocative ideas to the table. I thank my panelists. I thank you, Sanjay and Manisha, who had also joined me and helped us in this, and all the participants who are here. We tried to answer some questions, but we have to keep to time because I think the last keynote is today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all the participants also.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mishra. Thank you, Anita. Thanks a lot.
It has been a great experience indeed.
Thank you, sir. We really enjoyed the session and several interesting takeaways from this for all of us.
We look forward to how do we do with this.
Yeah. Thank you so much. On that note, please note that we have our final keynote for today, which is going to start in a couple of minutes on our track 1. This keynote address is on Lessons from a Crisis, the Princeton Experience by Dr. Deborah Prentice, the Provost of Princeton University. This session will be moderated by Dr. Pramatraj Sinha, who's the founder and chairman of Harappa Education. In case you're interested in attending this session, please click on the link that has been provided to you in the chat box right now. When you click this link, it will take you to track 1, where the keynote address will start momentarily. Please note the keynote address is only available on track 1. We are done with all our sessions on track 2. Thank you so much. This brings us end to the program on track 2. Let me quickly also remind you that all the Republic of Letter conference recordings will be available on YouTube soon. I want to quickly thank our partners, Association of Indian Universities, Careers 360, College Dunia, Digital Learning, EdTech Review, Education Promotion Society of India, Harvard Business Publishing, Harvard Business School, India Research Center. On that note, I encourage all of you to attend the final keynote address of Republic of Letters. We expect it to be an extremely engaging and exciting session. See you soon.